Hey, what's up guys? This is Nishi here from MST.TV. So today we're going to take a look at my top 10 favorite penny stock choices right now in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Now when I say penny stock, I'm talking about cards that are $5 or less generally. In fact, I think that today we are going to be looking at cards that are under $3 each. These are among my favorite cards to look at because they're generally quite low risk, but they have some solid potential upside. If we're investing in cards that are only $1 or $2, it's not like they could get much cheaper than they're currently at, so there's little downside, but we've seen plenty of times in the past where dollar cards easily spike to $5 or more, which is a very solid return, especially if you own multiple copies of the card. They also make really solid cards to pick up in trades where you can use these cards that are low in value to round off trades or try to pick up as throw-ins in order to finish deals. Now, of course, the cards that I'm talking about and recommending in this video are just my own personal thoughts and opinions, so be sure to think for yourselves and use your own discretion before deciding to invest in any of the cards I talk about today. Let's get started. So kicking things off, we have No Material. This is a card that a lot of people have had really mixed opinions about over the course of its lifetime. Now, on one hand, its effect is potentially really devastating, as you can effectively prevent your opponent from making any sort of follow-up play. Looking at the current format, you could use it to prevent your opponent from going into S0 Utopic Zexal or Linkross and end their turn. But on the other hand, you have to control no cards in order to activate it. So unless you have it on your first turn, there is a lot of potential for the card to be dead. As a result, whether or not this card has actually seen play has always been a question of whether or not the potential benefit of being able to stop your opponent's turn is worth the risk of bricking on this card later in the game. We see similar situations with other cards like Dimension Shifter or Madolche Pettingcessor, both cards that are really only viable on turn 1, but have still found their way into meta decks and strategies, so it really does just kind of depend on how the meta looks moving forward and this card's potential uses within that meta. Now, when No Material just had the secret rare printing, it was anywhere from $10 to $15, maybe at most $20 a piece, and at that point I don't think it was worth the gamble. But now with the ultra rare reprint in the 2020 Megatins, you can pick up this card for only $1 or so, and I definitely think that at that price, it's cheap enough that you can hold on to a few extra copies just in case we do see that meta where this card is really viable. This card isn't the safest thing unlike some of the other cards on this list because it doesn't have a history of being useful in past formats, but at only $1 a piece, I think that the upside potential from the possibility of meta relevancy definitely makes this card a worthwhile penny stock. At number 2, we have Ultra Rare Super Polymerization from Dual Devastator. Super Poly has always been a card that has a lot of potential to win games single-handedly, as you can fuse multiple monsters from your opponent's board together to give you a monster on the field, and your opponent can't respond to this card at all. Back in Shaddoll format, this card was absolutely insane, and we've seen it used at various points in Yu-Gi-Oh! History since then to help get rid of big boards, most notably against the Thunder Dragon deck. I feel like at the moment, Super Polymerization is incredibly underutilized. There aren't really any boards at the moment where you can drop Super Poly and get rid of enough pieces of the board to allow yourself to play, and the fact that you also have to discard a card for it just makes it that little bit harder. I think that right now, Dark Ruler No More is just more effective as a board breaker, as it shuts down all of your opponent's monster effects single-handedly and allows you to use other resources to break through the board. Of course, I think it is inevitable that Super Polymerization will re-emerge in the meta at some point in the future. Being a quick play spell card, you can use it to interrupt your opponent at a key point in their combo and then end their turn, while also giving you a monster on the field as well. Now, that being said, I think that at just $2 a piece, the ultra rare copies of Super Polymerization are definitely worth picking up as a relatively nice hollow version of an underappreciated card. Super Poly does have a history of spiking in price as well, as we've seen even the common versions hit $8 to $10 before we saw the last couple of reprints, so we should definitely be able to see the Ultras rebound in price when the card starts to see play once again. It's an easy card to use, and it's really satisfying to see your opponent's entire board wiped out when they don't have the option to respond at all. If you can find people willing to offload these for around $1.50 to $2 a piece, I think they are great holds that should be quite easy to offload when they do eventually find their way back into the meta. Number 3 here, we have Super Rare Solemn Judgment from Secret Slayers, a card that I know people have been looking at and picking up really slowly ever since Secret Slayers first dropped. Solemn Judgment feels like the gold standard for what a counter trap should do, being extremely versatile as it can be used to negate spells, traps, or summons that do not start a chain, and with a cost of half your current amount of life points, this card is basically always live. With Harpy's Feather Duster running around, Solemn Judgment can be a great card used to protect the rest of your back row from being destroyed, or alternatively, you can use it to back up an established field, as you can use it to negate something like Dark Ruler No More, or address the summon of a monster that you're unable to hit using one of your monster effects. I think that there's definitely a lot of people looking at Solemn Judgment, as these super rare versions have steadily increased in price from being $1 on Secret Slayer's release to now being $2.50 a piece. However, I actually think that around the $2 mark, this card is still a really solid pickup and definitely has a chance of hitting $5 in the not so distant future. This card is needed for a lot of older formats, so between those and current Yu-Gi-Oh, there always seems to be a demand for the card that drives the value up. It's one of those cards that's very similar to Allure of Darkness or Gold Sarcophagus, where no matter how many times the card gets reprinted, it always manages to find its way back up there in terms of price. I think that while the card maybe isn't too useful now, it definitely will see an increase in play moving forward with the popularity of Harpy's Feather Duster and Dark Ruler No More on the rise, so it's definitely a card I would be looking at picking up sooner rather than later. Next up, we have Cross Sheep from Battles of Legend Armageddon. So I don't know why, but I feel like most people have just completely forgotten about Cross Sheep for the past like half a year or so. The card has completely fallen off of people's radars. I remember when this card first came out, there were actually people arguing that it should be banned, which was obviously never going to happen, right? But it is a really strong card nonetheless. It is a generic rank 2 monster and one of the best link 2s available in the game, helping out any fusion based strategy by summoning a level 4 or lower monster from your graveyard whenever you conduct a fusion summon. Now, after coming out in Ignition Assault and being a $10 rare at the beginning, it was reprinted as an ultra rare in Battles of Legend Armageddon, and you can now pick them up for only $1 a piece. For a card as strong as this, I think it is criminally undervalued and could very easily be at least a $5 card if it sees an uptick in play in the meta. I think that the reason this card is so cheap at the moment is that we just don't really have any good fusion-based decks as part of the meta at the moment. We obviously have Dragoon, but typically whenever you get Dragoon onto the board, you can't summon afterwards, so this card isn't that great because you don't get that monster back from the graveyard. And I guess there is something like Frightfur, but that's really more of a rogue strategy. Also remember that Cross Sheep does have a couple of other effects if you Ritual, Synchro, or Ixis summon, most notably being Ritual Summon, but those effects aren't as popular and aren't likely to drive the demand of Cross Sheep up the same way that a fusion-based deck would. As soon as we get some sort of new fusion-based strategy into the game, or maybe a ritual strategy, depending on how the archetypes play out, I would expect ultra rare Cross Sheeps to skyrocket in value, as it is a card that is very likely to see play in any sort of fusion-based strategy. This card is definitely one of the strongest penny stocks on this list and is something that I would definitely recommend picking up as many copies of as possible if you can snag them at $1 or less each. And onto our number 5 pick, we have Toon Table of Contents, but specifically we're looking at the ultra rares with the alternate colored text from Legendary Duelist Season 1. Toon Table of Contents is a really important card in Toons, allowing you to search for basically any card from the Toon archetype, and it isn't even a once per turn effect. Now, this isn't to say that Toons are going to be a meta viable archetype anytime soon, but what I will say is that we can't underestimate the impact on the market of collectors and casual players. With Toons being an archetype from the original Yu-Gi-Oh series, there's a ton of players who love seeing these old cards and will want to collect them all and then try to build and play the deck as well. Because of this, we've consistently seen all versions of Toon Tables of Contents climb up in price as time goes on. Even the super rares from Dark Saviors were worth a few bucks, despite being worth next to nothing on the set's first release. We also want to keep in mind just how niche and unique these colored ultra rares are. I feel like they really fit the Toon aesthetic well, so they'll definitely be nice collectible pieces that will gradually get eaten up off the market over time. Remember that these versions of the card came in those little boxes where the retail MSRP to open them was $15 or 20 Canadian dollars, so it's a bit more expensive to go in and open these packs than it would have been with other side sets. This, combined with the fact that there aren't really any meta relevant or viable cards found in the set, means that there probably isn't too much quantity floating around on the market. So overall, even though you're looking at a market value of just $1 each at the moment, I think it's kind of a perfect storm brewing here, and we should definitely expect these colored rare tune tables of contents to appreciate in value steadily over time. We're halfway through the list now, and this is one that you guys would probably already know about if you watched the Megatin videos we did earlier. We have secret rare crackdowns from the 2020 Megatins. This card is a little bit more expensive, up at $2 to $3 a piece, but despite that, I do think it is still well worth the price as a penny stock investment. Crackdown can be a very annoying card to deal with, as you not only prevent that monster from activating its effect, but you also steal the body away from your opponent so that they can't use it as a material after. It's an extremely powerful form of interruption, and I feel like any sort of deck where you're running back row, like Altergeist or Subterrors, would want to be running 2 to 3 copies of this card. Now, of course, with Harpy's Feather Duster just emerging in the meta, maybe this card isn't going to be as popular of an option anytime in the immediate future. However, I think that after people start to adjust to play around Duster with cards like Solemn Judgment or Starlight Road, we can see Crackdown start to emerge once again. Another difficult factor at the moment is people main decking back row removal like Cosmic Cyclone in order to deal with Mystic Mine, but when Mystic Mine hopefully eventually gets banned, we can see Crackdown increase in play as it becomes something that people just naturally play fewer outs to in their decks. Keep in mind that we've seen the super rare crackdowns at over $5 a piece, which is quite a bit for a super rare from a recent set. And even though the secret rare is a reprint, it's not like they were especially easy to pull. This is a card that I personally am always looking to pick up these secret rare copies of for around $2 each, because even if it does get a common reprint, that is unlikely to lower the price any further. On the other hand, as a prismatic secret rare, this is the nicest print that we're likely to get of a really strong card, so I feel like it has a lot of potential to increase in price. At number 7, we have Shared Ride. Now, Shared Ride is a card that has seen meta play before, often in the side deck, but sometimes even in the main deck as well. Shared Ride is kind of similar to Max C in that it offers the potential for multiple draws in the same turn, but of course, it gives you a draw per search instead of per special summon, and it's a quick play spell instead of a hand trap. As a result, the card is really only useful if you're going first, so that you can set it and then flip it during your opponent's turn, but also, whereas people do a ton of special summoning in every single format, searching isn't necessarily as key in every format, where we might see some decks that just special summon from the deck, or they draw, or do some sort of other mechanic. Right now, this card might actually be pretty decent, since we see a fair amount of searching from Dragon Link, Noble Knights, and Dogmatica invoked, but given that the card hasn't made its way into any top deck lists yet that we've seen thus far, the card, I guess, just isn't as popular of an option right now. I guess that with all of the emphasis on setting up unbreakable boards, Shared Ride being a card that draws you cards but doesn't necessarily stop your opponent from doing anything, just isn't as strong of an option. Nevertheless, you can pick up secret rare copies of Shared Ride for only $1 that's either the original or the reprint from the Megatin, which is really cheap when you consider that we've seen even the Megatin reprints at $5 or $6 not too long ago. Even though the card has gold rare and common printings, we can definitely expect the secret rares to go up from $1 or $2 if the card ever makes an appearance in the meta again as the highest rarity versions of the card. At number 8, Artifact Sanctum is an amazing side deck card that has seen a ton of meta play over the years. It summons Artifact Scythe directly out of your deck, which locks your opponent out of their extra deck for the turn, so it can definitely lead to a blowout the following turn if your opponent isn't able to set anything up. This card does have a history of spiking up in price, as we've seen both the Battles of Legend secret rares and the Megatin reprint ultra rares hit over $15 to $20 each. The penny stock version that we'll be looking at here today is the ultra rare reprint from Battles of Legend Armageddon, the most recent printing of the card, which surprisingly sits at only $2 each. Because this is the 4th reprint of the card, I think a lot of people were expecting it to absolutely tank in price, especially because I don't think that this reprint was particularly hard to pull. Despite this, however, I think a big part of the reason that we're seeing it so low is that it's not really seeing much meta play at the moment, even in the side deck. With cards like Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, Infinite Impermanence, Ciphering Gear Gamma, and Triple Tactics Talent running around in the format now, it's actually pretty easy to get through Scythe without any extra effort. As a result, we don't really see very many people running the Artifact engine in the sideboard. However, this is just another one of those cards where we'll have to wait for the right format to emerge, and when we inevitably do, even the lowest rarity ultra rare version will jump back up in price, assuming of course that we don't get a common or rare printing of the card anytime soon. With Harpy's Feather Duster running around now, this card and the rest of the artifact package as a whole might actually start to see more play in the future, as they can make your opponent think twice before deciding to drop Duster on you, so it's definitely a package that you'll want to have access to moving forward. Therefore, now is the perfect time to pick the card up, while there isn't too much of a demand for it and the prices are reasonably low. So the second to last card here is Trickstar Korribane, and I believe I talked about this card when I did one of the Megaton discussions as well. Believe it or not, I think that Korribane is actually a really amazing pickup at the moment at under $1 a piece, and has a lot of potential factors that could drive its price up in the future. Most notably, Trickstar Lightstage is still at 1, but if we ever see it go to 2 or 3, it could definitely directly result in a jump in the price of Korribane, as the whole Trickstar deck may look more viable as a strategy. Even if Lightstage stays at 1 though, Trickstar Candina and Korribane together are very frequently used together as an easy way to get 2 monsters onto the board to go into some generic Link 2 plays. One of the reasons that the Trickstar engine was hit in the first place is that it was used to get 2 monsters onto the board to make Nightmare Cerberus or Nightmare Phoenix so that you could go into Nightmare Mermaid. Even in the current format, I personally am using a small Trickstar engine in my Invoke Dogmatica deck for some access to Verte Anaconda and Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, which has actually come up multiple times. However, there's also the possibility of Trickstar Korribane as a 3-of combo starter, kind of similarly to how Tenyi Spirit Atara, Madolche Pettingcessor, or the Unexpected Die package are used. It could just be a situational thing where the engine specifically wants like a level 5 or higher monster or a light, who knows? So yeah, it may seem like an odd choice because technically this is still a Trickstar card, but I feel like the card and engine can be used very generically and splashed into a lot of different strategies, and for those potential applications, I have this card down as one of my top penny stocks at the moment. The last card is actually a card that I don't really see too many people talking about that often, despite how the card has seen a reasonable amount of side deck play over the last decade or so. We are looking at Super Rare Gozen Match from Hidden Summoners. The Super Rare version here is definitely undervalued in my opinion, at only $1 a piece, and certainly has the potential to increase a fair amount in price if it were to ever see an increase in side deck play once again. We saw it a tiny bit with Salamangrate, but really that's about it for the past few years. However, it can be a really devastating card. I think that the card is very comparable to There Can Be Only One, which was so annoying that people were calling for it to be limited at one point. Obviously, they're kind of different in the restriction that they provide, but they're very similar Floodgate type cards, and it just takes the right standout deck being able to abuse this card once again against other meta decks for it to become a side deck staple. Now, despite being a very old card, the Hidden Summoners reprint is the first and only holo printing of the card. All other versions are commons, so if it were to see an increase in demand due to meta play, it is clear that the super rare version would be the one that everyone would go after. On top of this, Hidden Summoners was a pretty bad set with very few redeeming qualities, so I feel like there wasn't a ton of it torn open. So yeah, overall we might have to wait a little while to come across a format where this card is a side deck staple, but I do think it's only a matter of time before we see it emerge as a popular meta tech choice once again. Alright guys, that is it for today's video. I'm sorry it did go on for a bit longer than I was expecting it to, but I wanted to make sure that I gave you guys thorough explanations for each of my card choices. I'm sure that there are plenty of cards that I forgot about, other cards that you'll want to keep an eye on, but these are the ones that are at the top of my list that I always try to keep an eye out for when I'm going through binders or anything like that. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's video, please be sure to let me know by hitting that thumbs up button for me. Also make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what other penny stocks you guys are looking out for so that I and other viewers can go through the comments and look at your ideas and we can kind of share our knowledge together that way. Also, if you haven't already and you want to see more great content like this and all of the other content that Tombox and I bring here to the channel, please make sure you hit that subscribe button. And until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.